Have you ever watched someone slowly disappear while still living under the same roof? 20 years is a long time. Long enough to forget what your own laughter sounds like. She wasn't broken all at once. She was chipped away word by word, silence by silence, until she started believing that this emptiness was love. Her name was Sara, and for 20 years she called herself a wife, when in truth she had become a shadow. Every morning she would wake before him, make the same breakfast, pack the same lunch, and watch the same man leave without ever looking back. You'd think routine means stability, but sometimes routine is just another name for quiet suffering. On their 20th anniversary, she looked at the mirror and whispered, "Is this what love is supposed to look like?" What she didn't know was that day, the day she asked herself that question, would be the day her entire life began to unravel. That morning felt like any other. The kettle whistled, the toast popped, and Sara's hands moved on their own. Out of habit, not out of love. He sat across the table reading the newspaper, not once looking up. 20 years and still, she didn't know what color his eyes looked like in the morning light. "Don't forget to iron my shirt," he said. No good morning. No smile. Just orders, like she was part of the furniture. But that day something felt different. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled when she poured his tea. Or maybe for the first time she noticed the wedding photo on the wall and realized she didn't recognize the woman in it anymore. She stared at that photo for a long time. The girl in that white dress. Eyes full of dreams, smile full of hope. Where did she go? When he left for work that morning, closing the door behind him, it didn't sound like a door anymore. It sounded like a lock clicking shut, the kind that keeps you trapped inside your own life. And as the clock ticked, and the house fell silent, Sara whispered to herself, "If I left right now, would anyone even notice?" Noon came and went the same way it always did. The house smelled of old perfume and forgotten promises. Sara sat by the window, tea cold, eyes empty, watching people pass by outside, all of them going somewhere, while she hadn't gone anywhere in 20 years. Her phone buzzed. One message, from an unknown number. "Hello, Mrs. Khan. Just a gentle reminder. Your husband's counseling session has been canceled again." Counseling? Her husband had never mentioned any counseling. Her heart skipped a beat. Was he seeing someone behind her back? Or hiding something worse? She tried to calm herself. "No, Sara. Don't imagine things." But the doubt had already crept in. And once doubt enters a quiet marriage, it doesn't leave easily. That night, as she set the dinner table, she looked at the empty chair across from hers, and realized even when he was home that chair always felt empty. Something inside her whispered, "You deserve to be seen." And for the first time in 20 years, she didn't wait for him to come home before eating. The next morning, Sara woke up earlier than usual. Something inside her was restless, an unease she couldn't name. She made his breakfast as always, toast, eggs, black coffee. But her hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup down. His briefcase was lying open on the sofa. She'd never looked inside it before. Never had a reason to. But that day, curiosity wasn't curiosity. It was survival. She opened it slowly, carefully, like someone opening a wound. And between reports and office memos was a small envelope. Inside was a receipt. A jewelry purchase. Not for her. A gold bracelet dated just last week, with an engraving she didn't recognize. For A. Her breath caught. The world blurred. The floor beneath her felt like it had disappeared. For A. Who was it? She stared at the receipt for minutes, unable to move. The silence in the house grew heavy, like the truth was pressing on her chest. That was the first time in 20 years she felt fear in her marriage. Not fear of violence. Fear of knowing the truth. The day passed, but the thought didn't. That receipt burned in her mind like fire. Every time she tried to ignore it, that single letter, echoed louder in her head. A for who? For what? When he came home that evening, she watched him quietly. His same cold smile, the same tired, "I'm late, don't ask." But this time Sara didn't nod. She didn't speak. She just observed. She noticed how he hid his phone under a file. How he smiled while typing, then locked the screen quickly. How he said meeting. But his shirt smelled like jasmine perfume, a scent she never wore. That night, when he fell asleep, Sara picked up his phone. Her hands shook. She'd never done this before. Not once in 20 years. But when she opened it, the screen flashed with a message. I miss you too. Same place tomorrow. From a contact saved as Amina Cherry Blossom. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Her heart didn't break all at once. It shattered slowly, piece by piece, with every word she read. That night Sara didn't cry. She just sat in the dark holding the phone, realizing the man she waited for every night never really came home. She sat in the dark until the first ray of morning touched her face. The phone was still in her hand, the proof of a truth she didn't ask for. Her eyes were dry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain had gone too deep for tears. In that silence she whispered to herself, he's been living 2 lives, while I've been waiting for one. That morning she didn't make breakfast, didn't iron his shirt, didn't ask if he wanted tea. She just sat there, still calm, watching him rush through his routine without even noticing her silence. You okay? He asked casually, tying his tie. She smiled faintly. Never better. He didn't even hear the weight in those 2 words. When he left, she opened her drawer and pulled out an old notebook, the one she used to write her dreams in. The pages were yellow, the ink faded, but one sentence still stood clear. One day I'll choose myself. She touched those words as if meeting an old friend again, and in that moment she decided. This time she wasn't going to cry. She was going to begin. That morning felt lighter. Not because the pain had faded, but because for once she had a secret too. A secret called courage. She took a deep breath, stood in front of the mirror, and saw a woman she hadn't looked at in years. Her hair slightly gray, her eyes tired, but there was something new in them, a quiet fire. She picked up her old lipstick from the drawer, the same one she used to wear when life felt beautiful. She hadn't touched it in almost a decade. With trembling hands she opened it, and for the first time in years, she smiled at herself. It wasn't about makeup. It wasn't about looks. It was about reminding herself she existed. That afternoon she stepped out. Alone. No reason, no destination. Just a small cafe down the street. She sat near the window, ordered tea. And for the first time in 20 years she didn't rush home. People around her laughed, talked, lived, and she realized how long it had been since she'd been part of the world. And right there, sipping her tea, she whispered, maybe this is how healing begins, quietly. When she came back home that evening, something in the air felt different. The house didn't scare her anymore. It felt smaller. Maybe because she finally felt a little bigger inside. He was already home, sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Where were you? He asked, not looking up. Out, she said. Just one word. Calm. Controlled. He blinked, surprised. In 20 years, she'd never said that word without an explanation. Out? With who? She smiled faintly, pouring herself some water. With someone I'm getting to know. Who? He asked again, his voice sharp now. She turned and looked at him, really looked at him, and said softly, me. His expression froze. For the first time he had no words. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was hers now. She walked past him, calm and graceful, and he just watched her, maybe realizing too late that something inside her had changed forever. That night, the moonlight fell across her face as she lay awake. He slept beside her, his back turned, just like always, but this time she wasn't looking at the wall. She was looking beyond it. She thought about all the years she had waited for birthdays to be remembered, for kindness to return, for love to be spoken aloud. 20 years of waiting. And in that waiting she had forgotten what living felt like. What if, she thought, I stop waiting for him and start waiting for myself? The idea felt strange, but also beautiful. Freedom wasn't loud. It was this, a quiet decision at 2 a.m., whispered only to the heart that's ready to listen. She looked at the man beside her, and for the first time didn't feel anger. Just distance. The kind that can't be crossed by words anymore. She closed her eyes and promised herself, tomorrow I begin packing. Not clothes but courage. Morning came quietly, like it was afraid to disturb her peace. Sara stood by the window, sunlight touching her face, and she realized she hadn't felt this alive in years. She opened her wardrobe, Rows of saris and dresses neatly ironed untouched. Each one held a memory, an anniversary that wasn't celebrated, a dinner that ended in silence, a dream that never began. She didn't pack much. Just one suitcase, her mother's photo, that old notebook, and the lipstick she had worn yesterday. But she wasn't packing things. She was packing pieces of herself, the ones she'd left behind in corners of this house. Each drawer she closed felt like a goodbye, not to him but to the woman she used to be. When she finished, she stood in the center of the room. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. Felt free. She stood by the door, suitcase beside her. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The sunlight touched the walls, and she realized this place had seen her at her weakest, but it would also witness her strength. She reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling slightly, not out of fear, but because endings are never easy, even when they're necessary. Just then her phone rang. She froze. The screen lit up with a familiar name. Amina Cherryblossom. Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at it for a moment, the symbol of betrayal glowing right in her hand. Then slowly she answered. Hello. A soft, trembling voice on the other side replied. I'm sorry, Mrs. Khan. I didn't know he was married. The woman's voice broke mid-sentence. She sounded young, lost, and in that moment Sara realized pain had never belonged to her alone. It's okay, she whispered. You don't owe me anything. She ended the call, looked at her suitcase again, and smiled faintly through tears. Neither do I. She took one last look around the house. The living room where laughter had once echoed, the kitchen where silence had lived for years, and the hallway where love used to wait, but stopped showing up. Every corner had a memory, but none worth staying for. So she whispered softly, Thank you for teaching me what I will never settle for again. She pulled the door open, and for a moment the morning light touched her face like a blessing. No tears, no second thoughts, just a calm breath, the kind that says I survived. She stepped outside, suitcase rolling behind her, the sound echoing softly in the hallway, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. The world outside was the same, but she wasn't. For the first time, she wasn't leaving something behind. She was walking towards something new. The morning air felt different, cooler, lighter. She woke up in a small rented room, sunlight peeking through thin white curtains. No noise, no orders, no footsteps echoing in the hallway. Just silence and peace. She made herself a cup of tea the way she liked it. Sweet, warm, quiet. The first sip brought tears to her eyes. Not because of pain, but because for the first time it was her choice. She sat by the window watching people outside. Children running to school, an old couple laughing on a bench, a woman reading under a tree. And she thought, the world kept moving. And now so will I. She opened her notebook, the same one she had carried in her suitcase, turned to a fresh page, and with steady hands she wrote just one line. Day 1, I am free. It wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of the one she chose to write herself. Days turned into weeks, and Sara slowly began to notice the little things again. The way sunlight danced on her coffee mug, the laughter of strangers in a cafe, the smell of rain on warm pavement. These small forgotten joys, they became her medicine. She started walking every evening. No destination, no hurry. Just the rhythm of her footsteps, and the whisper of the city that once scared her, now felt like home. One evening, she saw an elderly woman feeding pigeons by the park bench. The woman looked at her and smiled. You look tired, dear, but there's light in your eyes again. Sara smiled back. She didn't reply, but something inside her healed a little in that moment. Sometimes it's not therapy or revenge that heals us. It's kindness from a stranger. That day she realized her story wasn't about pain anymore. It was about becoming whole again. Months had passed. The wounds had faded, not vanished, but softened like scars that no longer hurt. Sara stood by the window again. Not the one she left behind, but the one she built for herself. Soft breeze sound. She looked at the sky, it was the same blue, but somehow it looked kinder today. She smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood. She didn't need perfect anymore. Music lifts soft, hopeful strings. She whispered to herself, I thought I lost everything that day. But I was just losing what wasn't mine. Gentle sigh, warmth in tone. Every ending hides a beginning. Every heartbreak hides a lesson. And sometimes the person you become, after breaking, is stronger than the one you were before. Piano fades, distant bird song. She closed her notebook, turned off the light, and smiled into the quiet. Because peace, finally felt like home. Soft wind, silence follows, full of calm.